Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates worried about prom dresses and weekend parties, she spent her afternoons at the local gym, lifting weights and perfecting her combat techniques. Her father, a retired Marine, had taught her that strength wasn't just about muscles, it was about never giving up. No matter what life threw at you. At 18, Sarah made a decision that shocked everyone in her hometown. She announced she was joining the Navy with dreams of becoming a SEAL. Her mother cried for 3 days straight, begging her daughter to reconsider. Her friends thought she had lost her mind. The military recruiters themselves seemed surprised when this petite brunette walked into their office with such fierce determination in her dark eyes. The training was brutal from day one. Sarah found herself among hundreds of other hopefuls, mostly men who towered over her small frame. They looked at her with skepticism, some with outright hostility. During the first week of basic training, she heard whispers behind her back about how she would never make it past the first month. Some of the male recruits made crude jokes about her presence, suggesting she belonged in the kitchen rather than on the battlefield, but Sarah had something. Most of them didn't, an unbreakable spirit forged by years of preparation and an inner fire that refused to be extinguished. When others complained about the freezing cold water during training exercises, she gritted her teeth and pushed through. When the physical demands seemed impossible, she found reserves of strength she didn't know existed. Her drill instructors noticed her determination early on. Though they showed no special treatment, the mental challenges proved just as difficult as the physical ones. Sarah had to memorize complex tactical procedures, learn advanced weapon systems, and master navigation techniques that would mean the difference between life and death in real combat situations. She studied late into the night while her fellow recruits slept. Knowing she had to work twice as hard to prove herself worthy of the SEAL teams, months passed, and one by one, many of the recruits who had initially mocked her began to drop out. The grueling pace, constant pressure, and extreme physical demands broke even the strongest men. But Sarah remained, her resolve growing stronger with each passing challenge. She began to earn respect from her peers, not because they went easy on her, but because she consistently proved she could handle everything they could. During underwater demolition training, Sarah excelled beyond all expectations. Her smaller size became an advantage as she could move through tight spaces others couldn't navigate. Her precision with explosives impressed even the most hardened instructors. When it came to marksmanship, her steady hands and focused mind made her one of the top shooters in her class. The transformation from a small-town girl to a lethal warrior wasn't just physical, it was complete. Sarah learned to think strategically under pressure, to remain calm when chaos erupted around her, and to make split-second decisions that could save or cost lives. She discovered leadership qualities she never knew she possessed, often helping struggling teammates who had once doubted her abilities. As graduation approached, Sarah stood among the select few who had survived the entire program. The young woman who had walked into that recruiting office years earlier was gone, replaced by a highly trained special operations soldier. Her family, who had initially feared for her safety, now looked at her with a mixture of pride and awe. She had achieved what many said was impossible, the Navy SEAL insignia on her uniform represented more than personal achievement. It symbolized breaking barriers and proving that determination could overcome any obstacle. Sarah knew this was just the beginning of her journey. Real missions lay ahead, where her training would be tested in ways no simulation could prepare her for. She was ready for whatever challenges awaited. Confident in her abilities and proud of how far she had come, her first assignment would take her to one of the most dangerous regions in the world, where her skills, courage, and resolve would face the ultimate test. Sarah Martinez was no longer just a girl with big dreams. She was a warrior prepared to serve her country with honor and distinction. The helicopter blades thundered overhead as Sarah adjusted her gear one final time. Below them stretched the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, where intelligence reports indicated a high-value target was hiding in a heavily fortified compound. This would be her first major operation as a fully certified Navy SEAL. and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Her team leader, Commander Jake Thompson, briefed them over the radio as they approached the drop zone. The mission seemed straightforward on paper: infiltrate the compound, capture or eliminate the terrorist leader, and extract valuable intelligence. But Sarah knew from her training that no mission ever went exactly according to plan, especially in hostile territory where danger lurked around every corner. The team consisted of 6 highly trained operators, each with specialized skills essential for the mission's success. Sarah's expertise in explosives and close-quarters combat made her invaluable for breaching fortified positions. As the only woman on the team, she had initially faced some skepticism from a few members, but her performance during training exercises had quickly silenced any doubts about her capabilities. As they fast-roped from the helicopter into the darkness, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with combat operations. Her boots hit the rocky ground silently, and within seconds the team moved into formation. Years of training kicked in automatically as they navigated through the treacherous terrain, avoiding detection by enemy patrols that moved like shadows through the mountains. The compound sat nestled between 2 steep cliffs, its position chosen specifically to make any assault extremely difficult. Tall concrete walls topped with razor wire surrounded the main building, while guard towers provided overlapping fields of fire. Sarah counted at least 12 armed sentries moving along the perimeter, their AK-47s gleaming in the moonlight. This was no amateur operation. They were dealing with experienced fighters who knew how to defend their position. Commander Thompson signaled for the team to take cover behind a cluster of boulders while he studied the compound through his night vision scope. Sarah positioned herself next to the team's communications specialist, monitoring radio chatter to detect any signs that their presence had been discovered. The terrorist group had sophisticated equipment, including thermal imaging devices, that could potentially spot their heat signatures. The plan called for Sarah to approach the eastern wall and plant explosive charges that would create a diversion while the rest of the team breached from the opposite side. She checked her demolition kit one more time, ensuring each device was properly armed and ready for deployment. The timing would be critical. Too early and they would lose the element of surprise. Too late and the team could be caught in a deadly crossfire. Moving like a ghost through the darkness, Sarah crept toward her target. Every shadow could hide an enemy fighter. Every sound might trigger an alarm that would bring dozens of weapons to bear on their position. Her heart pounded as she reached the base of the wall, but her hands remained steady as she began placing the charges according to her calculations. Just as she finished setting the last explosive, voices erupted from inside the compound. Someone was shouting orders in a local dialect, and suddenly lights began flooding the area around the walls. Sarah pressed herself against the concrete, realizing their mission had been compromised. Enemy fighters were moving to defensive positions, and the element of surprise was quickly disappearing. Commander Thompson's voice crackled through her earpiece, confirming what she already knew: they had been detected, probably by sophisticated surveillance equipment they hadn't anticipated. The mission parameters had changed instantly from a covert infiltration to a full combat assault. Sarah would need to detonate her charges immediately to create the chaos necessary for her team to have any chance of success. As she reached for the detonator, the sharp crack of rifle fire echoed across the mountains. The battle had begun, and there was no turning back. Sarah knew that the next few minutes would determine not only the success of their mission, but whether any of them would make it home alive. The training was over. This was real combat, where split-second decisions and unwavering courage would separate the living from the dead. The explosives in her hand represented more than just a tactical advantage. They were the key to her team's survival in what was rapidly becoming one of the most dangerous situations any of them had ever faced. The explosion Sarah triggered sent chunks of concrete and debris flying through the night air, creating a thunderous roar that echoed off the surrounding mountains. Orange flames illuminated the darkness as her perfectly placed charges blew a massive hole in the eastern wall. The diversion worked exactly as planned, drawing enemy fire away from her teammates, who were preparing to breach from the opposite side of the compound. But as Sarah moved to rejoin her team, automatic weapon fire erupted from multiple positions. Bullets whistled past her head, forcing her to dive behind a pile of rubble for cover. The enemy fighters had recovered from the initial shock faster than expected and were now laying down a devastating field of fire that threatened to pin down the entire SEAL team. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see muzzle flashes coming from at least 4 different guard positions. The terrorists were well trained and disciplined, maintaining their defensive positions while coordinating their fire to create overlapping kill zones. She realized that her team was walking into a carefully prepared trap, and their only chance of survival was to disrupt the enemy's defensive plan. Commander Thompson's voice came through her radio, tense but controlled. 2 of her teammates were pinned down near the main building, unable to advance or retreat without exposing themselves to deadly crossfire. The mission was rapidly turning into a nightmare scenario, where highly trained special operations soldiers found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by determined enemy fighters. Sarah made a split-second decision that would change everything. Instead of falling back to a safer position, she grabbed her assault rifle and began moving toward the nearest guard tower. Her plan was incredibly dangerous. She would assault the position single-handedly, hoping to eliminate enough defenders to give her team a chance to complete their mission. Racing across open ground under intense enemy fire, Sarah felt bullets striking the dirt around her feet. The enemy had spotted her movement and were concentrating their fire in her direction. She reached the base of the guard tower just as grenades began exploding nearby, sending deadly shrapnel flying through the air like thousands of razor-sharp knives. The tower ladder stretched 15 feet above her, and she knew that climbing it would expose her to fire from multiple directions. But her teammates were counting on her to eliminate this threat, and Sarah had never backed down from a challenge in her entire life. She slung her rifle across her back and began ascending the ladder as quickly as possible. Halfway up, she heard the distinctive sound of an enemy fighter moving on the platform above her. Sarah drew her sidearm with one hand while maintaining her grip on the ladder with the other. As a head appeared over the edge of the platform, she fired 3 precise shots that eliminated the threat before he could raise his weapon, reaching the top of the tower. Sarah found herself in possession of a commanding view of the entire compound. From this elevated position, she could see her teammates moving through the shadows below, still trapped by enemy fire from multiple directions. She also spotted something that made her blood run cold. Additional enemy reinforcements were approaching the compound from the north. Threatening to overwhelm her small team completely, Sarah immediately began engaging targets with her rifle, using her elevated position to deadly effect. Her marksmanship training paid off as she systematically eliminated enemy fighters who had been pinning down her teammates. Each shot was carefully aimed and precisely delivered, turning the tide of battle in favor of the SEAL team, but her success drew attention from every enemy fighter in the compound. Suddenly, all their fire was concentrated on her position in the tower. Bullets struck the concrete walls around her, sending chips of masonry flying. Sarah realized she had become the primary target, but she continued firing to give her team the chance they needed to complete their mission. Rocket-propelled grenades streaked through the darkness toward her position. Sarah threw herself to the floor of the platform just as the explosive warhead struck the base of the tower. The entire structure shook violently, and she felt it beginning to lean at a dangerous angle. Cracks appeared in the concrete walls, and she knew the tower was about to collapse. As debris rained down around her, Sarah heard Commander Thompson shouting over the radio that they had secured the target building and were preparing to extract. Her diversion had worked, but now she was trapped in a collapsing tower with enemy fighters closing in from all directions. The next few seconds would determine whether her heroic actions had saved her team or simply delayed their inevitable defeat. The guard tower swayed like a tree in a hurricane as another explosion rocked its foundation. Sarah felt the concrete platform tilting at an impossible angle beneath her feet. She had only seconds before the entire structure would collapse, taking her down with it into the rubble-filled courtyard below. With enemy fighters converging on her position from multiple directions, she needed to act immediately or face certain death without hesitation. Sarah grabbed her rappelling rope and secured it to the strongest point she could find on the crumbling platform. The tower was leaning so severely that she would have to swing out over the compound wall to reach safety. As bullets continued to pepper the concrete around her, she prepared to make what might be her final leap. Just as she was about to rappel down, a massive piece of debris struck her right shoulder with devastating force. The impact sent waves of agony through her entire body, and she heard the sickening crack of bones breaking. Her right arm went completely numb, hanging uselessly at her side as blood began seeping through her tactical gear. The tower gave one final shudder before beginning its catastrophic collapse. Sarah had no choice but to grip the rope with her left hand alone and leap from the disintegrating platform. The pain in her shattered right arm was excruciating, but she forced herself to ignore it as she swung through the darkness toward the compound wall. Her landing was anything but graceful. Sarah hit the ground hard, rolling several times before coming to rest against a pile of sandbags. The impact jarred her broken arm, sending fresh waves of agony coursing through her nervous system. For a moment she lay still, fighting off the nausea and dizziness that threatened to overwhelm her consciousness. Enemy voices shouted nearby, as fighters searched through the rubble for her body. They assumed she had been killed in the tower collapse, but Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before they discovered she had survived. With her right arm completely useless, she would have to rely entirely on her left hand to operate her weapon and equipment. "Commander," Thompson's voice crackled through her radio earpiece, reporting that the team had successfully captured the terrorist leader and secured crucial intelligence documents. They were moving toward the extraction point, but enemy reinforcements were arriving faster than anticipated. The situation was becoming increasingly desperate for everyone involved. Sarah struggled to her feet, her right arm dangling limply as she attempted to check her equipment. Her primary rifle required two hands to operate effectively, making it nearly impossible to use in her current condition. She would have to rely on her sidearm, which she could manage with her left hand. Though her accuracy and rate of fire would be severely compromised, through the darkness, she could see muzzle flashes erupting near the extraction point where her teammates were fighting a running battle with pursuing enemy forces. They were outnumbered and running low on ammunition, desperately trying to reach the landing zone where their helicopter would arrive for pickup. Sarah realized her team needed her support. Despite her devastating injury, fighting through waves of pain and weakness, Sarah began moving toward the sound of gunfire. Every step was agony, and she had to stop frequently to rest and regain her strength. Her tactical gear felt impossibly heavy, and the weight of her weapons and equipment strained her remaining functional arm to its limits. As she approached the firefight, Sarah could see that her teammates were pinned down behind a low stone wall while enemy fighters attempted to flank them from both sides. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and it appeared the SEAL team might not make it to the extraction point alive. Their only hope lay in someone creating a diversion to break up the enemy assault. Drawing her sidearm with her left hand, Sarah checked the magazine to ensure she had a full load of ammunition. Her shooting stance would be completely different now, and she would have to compensate for the altered balance and reduced stability. But years of training had taught her to adapt to any situation, and she was determined not to let her injury prevent her from completing the mission. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to enter the battle with only one functional arm. Her teammates' lives depended on her ability to fight effectively despite her severe injury. The next few minutes would test every skill she had learned and every ounce of courage she possessed. There was no room for failure. Too many lives hung in the balance. Sarah forced herself to move despite the crushing pain radiating from her shattered right arm. Each step toward the firefight required tremendous willpower, but she could hear her teammates calling for assistance over the radio. Enemy fighters were closing in from multiple directions, threatening to surround the SEAL team before they could reach the extraction point. Using her left hand to steady herself against a concrete barrier, Sarah surveyed the tactical situation. 3 of her teammates were trapped behind inadequate cover while at least 8 enemy fighters advanced on their position. The terrorists were using classic pincer movement tactics, coordinating their assault to eliminate any escape routes for the surrounded Americans. Sarah realized she needed to attack from an unexpected direction to have any chance of success with only one functional arm. Moving as quietly as possible through the shadows, she circled around to approach the enemy fighters from their blind spot. Her broken right arm made stealth movement extremely difficult, but years of training had taught her how to move silently even under the worst conditions. The first enemy fighter never saw her coming. Sarah emerged from the darkness behind him and used her left hand to deliver a precise blow to his neck, dropping him instantly without making a sound. She quickly retrieved his assault rifle. Though operating it single-handed would be nearly impossible in a sustained firefight. 2 more enemy fighters were advancing toward her teammate's position. Their attention focused entirely on the Americans pinned down behind the stone wall. Sarah raised the captured rifle with her left hand, bracing it against her body for stability. Her first shot missed completely due to the awkward shooting position, but the muzzle flash gave away her location to the remaining enemies. Suddenly, automatic weapon fire erupted from multiple directions as the enemy fighters realized they were being attacked from behind. Sarah threw herself behind a pile of debris just as bullets began chipping away at the concrete around her. She was now trapped in the same situation as her teammates. Outnumbered and outgunned with limited cover, Commander Thompson's voice came through her earpiece, reporting that the extraction helicopter was approaching but couldn't land under such heavy fire. The pilot needed the landing zone cleared of enemy fighters before he could safely retrieve the team. Sarah knew this meant they would have to eliminate every remaining enemy fighter, a seemingly impossible task given their current circumstances. Fighting through waves of nausea from her injury, Sarah began moving again. She used the captured rifle to lay down suppressing fire while advancing on the next enemy position. Her left-handed shooting was improving with each engagement, though she was burning through ammunition much faster than normal due to her reduced accuracy. As she reached the corner of a damaged building, Sarah came face to face with an enemy fighter who was preparing to throw a grenade toward her teammates. Without hesitation, she grabbed his wrist with her left hand and used her momentum to slam him against the concrete wall. The grenade fell from his grasp and rolled away harmlessly. The physical struggle was intense and brief. Sarah's opponent was larger and stronger, but her training in close-quarters combat gave her the advantage. Using leverage and technique rather than brute strength, she managed to disarm and neutralize him despite fighting with only one arm. She retrieved his weapon and additional ammunition magazines from her new position. Sarah could see the extraction helicopter circling overhead, unable to land while enemy fire continued to rake the landing zone. 2 enemy fighters with rocket-propelled grenades were moving into position to target the aircraft, which would doom the entire mission and everyone involved. Sarah made another life-or-death decision. She would have to leave her covered position and advance across open ground to stop the enemy anti-aircraft team. With her right arm useless and her strength fading from blood loss, this assault would likely be her final action. But her teammates' lives depended on keeping that helicopter in the air, summoning every ounce of determination she possessed. Sarah emerged from cover and began her desperate charge across the bullet-swept courtyard. Enemy fire erupted from multiple positions as fighters spotted her movement. Bullets struck the ground around her feet and whistled past her head, but she continued advancing toward the 2 men with rocket launchers. Her left hand gripped the assault rifle tightly as she fired short, controlled bursts at the enemy anti-aircraft team. One of the fighters went down immediately, but the second man was already shouldering his rocket launcher and aiming at the circling helicopter. Sarah had only seconds to stop him before he destroyed their only means of escape from this deadly situation. Time seemed to slow as Sarah watched the enemy fighter raise his rocket launcher toward the circling helicopter. Her left hand was already bringing her rifle to bear, but she knew the distance was too great for an accurate shot with her compromised shooting stance. The helicopter pilot was completely unaware of the imminent threat. Focused on finding a safe landing spot in the chaos below. With no other options available, Sarah made a decision that defied all tactical logic. She dropped her rifle and sprinted directly toward the man with the rocket launcher, knowing she would never reach him in time but hoping to distract him from his target. Her broken right arm bounced painfully with each running step, sending fresh waves of agony through her entire body. The enemy fighter noticed her desperate charge at the last possible moment. He began to swing the rocket launcher in her direction, torn between his original target and the immediate threat bearing down on him. This moment of hesitation was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Anything to disrupt his aim and buy precious seconds for her team. Just as the man fired his rocket-propelled grenade, Sarah launched herself through the air in a diving tackle. Her left shoulder struck him at waist level, knocking him sideways as the rocket streaked harmlessly past the helicopter and exploded against the mountainside beyond. Both fighters crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, with Sarah's injured arm taking another devastating impact. The enemy soldier was stunned but not seriously hurt by the collision. He quickly reached for the knife on his belt, determined to finish the fight at close range. Sarah rolled away from his first slashing attack, using her legs to kick at his weapon hand while her left arm blocked his attempts to pin her down. Fighting with only one functional arm against a skilled opponent was like trying to swim with one hand tied behind her back. Every move she made felt clumsy and off balance compared to her normal fighting technique. The enemy fighter pressed. His advantage, raining down blows that Sarah could barely deflect with her single working limb. But Sarah's determination burned brighter than her physical pain. When the fighter raised his knife for what should have been a killing blow, she managed to grab his wrist with her left hand and use his own momentum to redirect the blade away from her body. Years of martial arts training had taught her how to turn an opponent's strength against them. The struggle continued for what felt like hours, but lasted only seconds. Sarah finally managed to gain control of the knife and end the threat, though. The effort left her gasping for breath and dizzy from blood loss. Her right arm had taken so much punishment that she could no longer feel anything below her shoulder, which was probably a blessing given the severity of her injuries. Commander Thompson's voice erupted over the radio with urgent updates. The remaining enemy fighters had been eliminated by the rest of the team, and the landing zone was finally clear. The helicopter was beginning its descent, but they had only minutes before enemy reinforcements would arrive in overwhelming numbers. Sarah struggled to her feet, swaying unsteadily as she tried to orient herself toward the extraction point. Her vision was becoming blurry, and she knew she was going into shock from her injuries and blood loss. Each step required enormous concentration just to maintain her balance and forward momentum. Through the darkness, she could see the helicopters, searchlights sweeping across the landing zone as it touched down. Her teammates were already moving toward the aircraft, carrying the captured terrorist leader and the intelligence materials they had risked everything to obtain. The mission was a success, but Sarah wasn't sure she would live to see the celebration. Her legs gave out just as she reached the perimeter of the landing zone. Sarah collapsed to her knees, no longer able to force her damaged body to continue. The world was spinning around her, and she could hear voices calling her name, but they seemed to be coming from very far away. Commander Thompson appeared at her side, along with the team medic who immediately began assessing her injuries. Sarah tried to speak, to tell them she was fine and could make it to the helicopter under her own power, but no words would come. Her strength was completely gone, drained by the combination of severe trauma and massive blood loss. As her teammates lifted her carefully and began carrying her toward the waiting aircraft, Sarah's vision faded to black. She had given everything. She had to ensure the mission's success and her team's survival. Whether she would live to fight another day remained to be seen, but she had proven that true warriors never surrender, no matter how desperate the circumstances become. Sarah's first sensation upon regaining consciousness was the steady beeping of medical monitors and the antiseptic smell of a military hospital. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the bright fluorescent lights overhead. The familiar weight of her tactical gear was gone, replaced by a thin hospital gown and countless bandages. Covering her injuries, her right arm was encased in a complex metal framework that held the shattered bones in precise alignment while they healed. Multiple surgical pins and screws had been required to reconstruct the damage caused by the falling debris and subsequent combat. The doctors had warned that she might never regain full use of the limb, a devastating blow for someone whose career depended on physical perfection. Commander Thompson sat in a chair beside her bed, his weathered face showing the strain of the past several days. He explained that she had been unconscious for nearly a week while surgeons worked to save her arm and treat her other injuries. The mission had been classified as a complete success, with the captured terrorist leader providing valuable intelligence that prevented several planned attacks on American targets. The news that should have filled Sarah with pride instead left her feeling empty and uncertain about her future. How could she continue serving as a Navy SEAL with a permanently damaged right arm? The physical demands of special operations required two fully functional limbs, and she knew the military had strict standards for medical fitness that she might no longer meet. During the following weeks of recovery, Sarah endured countless hours of physical therapy designed to restore as much function as possible to her injured arm. The process was frustrating and painful, with progress measured in tiny increments rather than dramatic improvements. Many exercises that had once been effortless now required enormous concentration and determination to complete. Her physical therapist was a former Marine who had lost his leg in combat several years earlier. He understood the psychological challenges that came with career-ending injuries and pushed Sarah harder than she thought possible. He constantly reminded her that limitations existed only in her mind, and that adaptive techniques could overcome almost any physical challenge. Slowly but steadily, Sarah began to develop new ways of performing tasks that had previously required both hands. She learned to field strip and reassemble weapons using only her left hand, to rappel and climb with modified techniques that compensated for her reduced grip strength, and to fight effectively in close-quarters combat using different leverage points and body positioning. The psychological adaptation proved even more difficult than the physical changes. Sarah had always defined herself through her physical capabilities and combat effectiveness. Learning to accept help from others and acknowledge her new limitations required a fundamental shift in her self-image that challenged everything she believed about herself. 6 months after the mission, Sarah faced a critical decision point in her recovery. Medical evaluators would soon determine whether she could return to active duty with the SEAL teams or would be reassigned to a less demanding role. She had worked tirelessly to prove that her injury wouldn't prevent her from performing at the highest level, but doubts lingered about whether she could truly match her previous capabilities. The final evaluation took place on a training course designed to test every aspect of SEAL operations. Sarah would have to complete the same challenges that had once seemed routine, now using adaptive techniques and relying heavily on her uninjured left arm. Her teammates watched nervously as she approached each obstacle, knowing how much this moment meant to her continued career. When Sarah successfully completed the combat course with a time that exceeded the minimum standards, the celebration was subdued but heartfelt. She had proven that determination and adaptation could overcome even severe physical limitations. Her commanders agreed that she could return to active duty, though with some restrictions on the types of missions she would be assigned. The experience had changed Sarah in ways that went far beyond her physical injury. She discovered reserves of mental strength that she never knew existed, learned to value teamwork and mutual support more deeply, and developed an unshakable confidence that no obstacle was truly insurmountable. Her reputation among fellow SEALs grew even stronger, as they recognized that her courage under fire had saved their lives. Years later, Sarah would look back on that night in Afghanistan as a turning point in her life. The injury that initially seemed like a career-ending catastrophe had actually revealed her true character and made her a more complete warrior. She continued to serve with distinction, mentoring younger SEALs and proving that true strength comes from the spirit rather than physical perfection. Sarah Martinez had learned that being broken didn't mean being defeated. Sometimes the most important victories come not from avoiding damage, but from rebuilding yourself stronger than before. Her shattered right arm had healed imperfectly, but her resolve had emerged unbreakable.